Well, in my world, it is Friday, and I am at the end of another interesting day. Um, I have had a four-letter word on my brain today, and it's not a bad four-letter word, although to some people it may be. That word is love. I've had love on my mind today, and the reason is that I have just been thinking about there's so many relationship things have come into my world. I have friends who are just starting divorce processes, which is just, kind of obviously one might say in a very simplistic way, although it doesn't really work this way, the end of a loving relationship and transforming into a different kind of relationship. So there's that. And then in my practice, I've had two kind of major love issues in my practice. One is, a couple who's been married for decades who are separated right now by the government and trying to maintain their connection and just kind of seeing that. And then another, a couple who's new in their relationship trying to navigate a really difficult crisis when it comes to their love relationship. And, so it's been kind of an interesting on both ends of the spectrum thought. And I think for me, it's just no matter what situation a person is in terms of their love relationships, it takes courage to do any of those things. It takes courage to end a love relationship and start a divorce process. It takes courage to stay in a relationship in spite of enormous barriers and crisis that comes to impede that relationship. It also takes courage to be a person who says, I'm not going to be in a relationship right now. And, so there's just courage is involved in all of these things. For me personally, because this is, me talking about what's on my mind, I have really had, I have this vision in my mind of this giant boundary, this giant barrier that I've had around my heart. These last few years, I've had I envision it with like cinder blocks and barbed wire. I have really protected my heart in the wake of my, my own love transformation that came from my marriage ending. And, and I think that that's not a bad thing. I think that was a really protective thing, because on the other side of creating that, protective barrier around my heart is that I have engaged in this real practice of self-love to kind of get me through all this. And in an earlier video, I talked about how self-love needs to be, in some contexts, an active verb for those who really need to do that for themselves. How do you nurture yourself? How do you fall in love with yourself again? How do you kind of take care of yourself? And that's been my process. And the courage that it took for me to actually not get involved in a kind of major relationship during this period of time, but to actually step back from that and learn to love myself and have the courage to actually sit with that discomfort of not having a partner and kind of keeping that from being my coping go-to. My go-to was, I need to figure out how to be okay with myself now. I need to figure out what my identity is now before I can do anything like that. And so these are all just rambly thoughts about how love can take many forms, and that it takes courage no matter what position a person is in when it comes to love relationships. And that sometimes the most courageous thing a person can do when it comes to love relationships is to end a love relationship. For other people, the most courageous thing they can do is to sustain it and to stick with it. I have found love in all kinds of ways, not just for myself, like I said, a self-love process, but I've found love with my friends and my environment, my home, my children. I have really felt extremely full of love in my life, even though I may not have had all this time monogamous love partner. So, and I have a date tonight. So maybe that's another reason it's on my mind. So, I think when we just invest in ourselves, again, the love comes, but love is a risk. Love is always a risk. And when someone makes a decision to stay in a relationship in spite of a crisis, that's a risk that they take. Starting a new relationship is a risk. There's so many risks involved with love, but obviously there's a million rewards around it too. So I think what I'm going to journal, I think my journaling little process or whatever is going to come to an end tonight, and perhaps tomorrow I'll go back to some more, physical manifestations of the mind-body exercise. But I think tonight I might just journal on how, I have found love in my life, say the last year, and what I intend to do the rest of 2020 to continue to bring love into my life, whether that's with friends or with my children or for myself. That's kind of where my head is. And the song that's been bouncing around my brain is a silly song that I'm going to post. And I don't know that it really goes so well with all the other songs, but that's not the point of that playlist. The point of my playlist is just what song is kind of in my head. And it's a silly song by a band called Camera Obscura. It's an old song, and it's called Lloyd, I'm Ready to Be Heartbroken. And I think anytime anybody goes on a date or starts a relationship or sustains a relationship, you're always at risk for getting your heart broken. But what is reward without a little risk, and vice versa? So I hope anybody watching this is finding ways to love themselves right now. So